Okay, I was going to do the live show. I apologize. I was going to do it right when the rankings came out, but we had Halloween, so I think some of y'all know how that goes. My initial reaction is essentially I'm not surprised really that Georgia was ranked number one. They have the best win in college football. It's over the number 3 team. I think Alabama certainly has a case to be number one, no doubt about it. But I think you have to rank them in some way. And for me, Georgia's had the best season so far through 8 games. Both teams have played Vanderbilt, Tennessee, and Mississippi. No, Alabama's not played at Mississippi State yet. But they both will play 4 conference teams that are like one another. At the end of the day, whoever's number 1 or number 2 in that scenario is not really something that matters. I do not think that Alabama will jump Georgia. I just don't, because LSU, that would knock LSU out of the top 25. Georgia's still got Mississippi State and Notre Dame as wins, and a win over number 20 or something like that is not going to jump Alabama over Georgia. Now, if Georgia doesn't, you will feel it. I mean, you will know if they are going to get jumped. You will feel it. Now, at the end of the day, does it matter? Normally, I would say it does not matter. I have to say in this particular scenario that this does matter, okay? I think my takeaway from tonight was that, ESPN is clamoring for 2 SEC teams to be in this thing. It's really not great for them, okay, because that's not ideal. You would rather have multiple teams from different parts of the country in it, but the Pac-12 is not doing their job, and neither is the Big Ten. So, tonight looked like the football committee is not ESPN, but let's not act like they don't have their. They both are aligned at the same time with one another. They're getting paid a lot of money from Disney, which owns ESPN. So. All this stuff. And please just hold off on it doesn't matter. Let's get to South Carolina stuff. I appreciate where you're coming from. I get that. That's not what this is about. That's not, I'm not a coach. I'm not a player. I don't have to worry about the next game. Y'all can do that as fans if you want to. This is about what people want to know about tonight is the college football playoff, what it means, and where they go from there. If Georgia loses to South Carolina, they can still win the national championship. They just can't lose the SEC championship. That's what this is. I mean, if Georgia goes through these next 4 games and they're undefeated, they will enter in the SEC championship game as the number 1 team. I don't see how they regress below Alabama, because Alabama won't have a better win, and the two haven't played one another. If they're both undefeated, they won't, nothing will change. I also think that the scenario here is that all 4 that are in the top 4 right now could be the ones who play at the end of the day. I do agree with, so my only, it's a little tricky my top 3 are definitely the 3. After that, though, I think you have a case for almost whoever's to number 10, which I have not deleted the email from the playoff committee yet. So I will go off the rankings right here. They always send it as a PDF. I don't know why they don't just send it as a inline text. So your 10 is Miami, which I do not think should be in the top 4. Wisconsin, which I do not think should be in the top 4. TCU, who I do not think should be in the top 4. I think the curious thing here is what happens with Penn State, Ohio State, and Oklahoma, and Clemson too. Clemson's had some games where they've not looked great. Obviously the Syracuse loss was bad. Their game against Tech was sloppy a little bit. Some of that's weather and all this stuff, but they have a pretty good win too, which is over Auburn, number 14. Oklahoma can still get a couple of decent wins with Texas Christian and and Oklahoma State coming up this weekend, actually. So OU still has the ability to jump Clemson. I'm not sure if Ohio State, if you can really be intellectually honest and say that the team that lost should jump another team, that would just be like Notre Dame jumping Georgia. From what I can, I mean, I don't think Notre Dame jumps Georgia if Georgia loses, probably. So, what can you do? Yeah, I'm not being disrespectful about focusing on what really matters. If you want me to talk about, hand placement on pads and, what to do, and I can talk like that, but I'll have no audience. And so that's not how this works. And you're watching it right now, so you have some interest in what's going on. I see several people talking about Auburn. I definitely think that's the toughest game moving forward. Of course, the problem for Auburn tonight was they lost one of their top running backs. Probably will miss the Georgia game. That's Georgia Auburn's 10 days away. So I don't think Pettaway will be back for the Georgia game. Of course, he missed last year's Georgia game. You don't like to see that. It's bad. These kids work. They all work. And just some guys get injured. It can happen. He's gotten injured a fair amount. I don't know. But Auburn can still win the conference, and in theory, they can still win the national championship. I mean, right now, there's all sorts of rhetoric about how, this team or that team can still win it, X, Y, Z. But it's hard for me to legitimately think that, for instance, Iowa State's going to get in there, or a 2-loss Virginia Tech, or like a 2-loss Miami, a 2-loss anybody from the ACC is probably not getting in. If we're being honest, I mean, they'll take Notre Dame, Georgia, Alabama, and and so forth. But there's just so much Munson from these comments. It's like, so much Munson, so much of that. It's so, still a lot of football to be played. Yeah, obvious. I mean, I hope that goes without being said, but I guess it doesn't. I guess y'all really just love the stress of not knowing that Georgia was going to kick the shit out of Florida like the way they did. And that was obvious from a couple of weeks ago. There was no confusion at all about who was going to win that game. The Auburn-Georgia game, there could be some confusion about that. Do you think teams start to get the message on non-conference schedule? No. I mean, I've got my board in there, and there's just not a lot of and that's not a Mark Richt thing. This is just Georgia people from a long time ago. A long time. I'm 40. I can very, very much remember the 1980s, and this is not different than them as far as the sort of assumed negativity. My wife's a Clemson fan. She does the same thing with Clemson, but nobody, there's nobody that does it like Georgia fan. Does South Carolina score on Georgia? I'm sure they will. I don't know. They're not great. They've beaten up some teams lately who are, not so hot. Yeah, Clemsoning, I think it's really Daboing myself, which is just like these inexplicable losses that just make no sense because he's done something crazy, and that just doesn't make sense to me. I think the Auburn game time is going to be 3:30. But it's either 3:30 or 7. We'll see. In terms of which you'd rather play, I think Georgia would rather play at 3:30 because they got to turn around and play Kentucky the next week. Why do you think Auburn is going to be so challenging? Because I think you always have to take Auburn seriously. And what I mean by that, I think Georgia should win the game, just to me. But that doesn't mean they will. This is not like the Florida game where Florida's imploding. I think you have to take them seriously because they have legitimate kids. They have a very good defense right now. But, I have a buddy of mine that was saying to me the other day, said, Georgia's just a bowling ball rolling down a very steep hill. And it's hard to have bad days when that's what you are. They are run game, defense, and punt, and they'll be fine. Auburn plays defense and can run the ball. They can. They do okay in this game. But Auburn, they haven't done okay lately. But last year doesn't really matter. Thoughts on the South Carolina safety talking trash? I think he said the truth as he saw it. I mean, that Georgia doesn't throw the ball a lot, but South Carolina's in for a long day. That's all I know. I mean, I've been to every South Carolina Georgia game since 1995, and I've been to all of them since '93 except one. So I just don't think that that's going to go well for South Carolina. I just don't. Nobody in the top 25 has 3 losses. USC is sitting there at number 17 at 7-2. Mississippi State at 6-2. Iowa State 6-2. Auburn is the number 14 team in the country at 6-2. So there are some 2-loss teams. And you got Memphis sneaking in there at 7-1 at the number 23 spot. So that means right now that Central Florida would go to the whatever bowl it would be. Atlanta, maybe, or Dallas, or Fiesta. I think it has to be one of those 3. Right now, if it lined up like this, it would go Georgia against Clemson in the Sugar Bowl, Alabama against Notre Dame in the Rose, and then Oklahoma would play in the Fiesta Bowl. Ohio State would play against Miami in the Orange Bowl, and then you would have a mismatch of things. Oklahoma could play Penn State at the Fiesta Bowl, or they could play in Atlanta. Texas Christian could play Penn State in the Cotton Bowl, or Oklahoma could play Penn State in the Cotton Bowl. So then you've got to also fill out Washington and Oklahoma State. They would have to go somewhere too. I do not think, unless Georgia or Alabama slips up, that the SEC will get a bunch of other teams into the playoff bowls. It doesn't look like it right now. Mississippi State and Auburn both still have to play Alabama, and they should lose those games. Same with LSU at 6-2. Someone was asking about Owen Popo, chance he ends up at Georgia. I would say they're pretty high. What do you think about Mac getting fired? Does LSU have any chance against Bama on Saturday? I do think they have a chance. I think that just like Auburn, LSU has physical bodies. They have guys that you've got to be aware of in terms of physicality. So I think their problem is, though, that this lateral stuff that they do against teams, it's not going to go well against Alabama. You have to hit Alabama square in the jaw and go forward. And if you don't do that, you're going to have a hard time. Alabama LSU is at night. It's at 8 p.m. So it'll probably kick off at like 8:17. In terms of what Florida did against Jim McElwain, I did not think that Florida had any recourse. I think you cannot say that you've lived through a death threat, that your players have been threatened for their lives. Once that happened, that was total jumping the shark. No pun intended. They had to do something. He had to be dismissed. It was the right call. They fired him for cause. That's the right call. He just cost himself $12 million, or about $8 million. It just should have never happened. It's poor on his part. The game is at Alabama, someone was asking a second ago. So you still got some interesting games. If Clemson were to slip out, the highest ranked ACC, it could be the ACC champion, goes to the Orange Bowl. Okay, if Miami wins it and everybody has a loss or two and they don't get in the playoff, the ACC champion does not get in the playoff, they go to the Orange Bowl automatically. Then they take the Orange Bowl has the rights to the highest ranked team in the Big Ten, SEC, or Notre Dame that's not either the conference champion or in the playoff, which we think right now the conference champion for the SEC will be in the playoff. So that means probably it would be, as it stands today, Ohio State. So that would be an Ohio State-Miami matchup, which would be halfway interesting. You have Notre Dame's schedule in front of you. I will have it in a second here. And they've had a good year. I mean, I think that NC State win was a good win. Obviously, the destruction of Michigan State and USC, as well as NC State, those are all solid wins. I mean, if they had beaten Georgia, they'd be the #1 team. If Georgia plays Alabama, how many times? I'm sorry, that goes. It would probably, how many times would you win? I would say maybe 2 or 3 out of 10, something like that. Do you want Georgia? Should Georgia people want Notre Dame to win out? I think they want them to win out as long as Georgia wins. As soon as Georgia loses and that becomes both of them with 1 loss, I'm pretty sure Georgia would still be in front of them. But it starts getting a little bit, then you're leaving some leeway. Look, if we're just being completely honest here, they've got to beat Auburn. I mean, they've got to beat Auburn. It's a bigger deal because they have to beat South Carolina and Kentucky, or they don't get to Atlanta. The Auburn game, they don't really have to win to get to Atlanta. I mean, they don't have to win it to get to Atlanta. So that's why, actually, it's so important. It is your margin of error. How loud would Sanford be on Saturday with the #1 team playing? I don't think that matters. I think why Sanford is loud or not loud is because of who they're playing, not how good Georgia is or is not. I mean, if the Gators ever arrived at Sanford or Georgia went to the Swamp, you would hear some very, very loud crowds in those 2 scenarios. But that doesn't exist, and probably will never exist. Does Georgia stay with the running game, or does Chaney have more passes and schemes for Fromm? I would not bother passing against South Carolina. They are not great against the run. I've got all the statistics up on the board in there, but I will run down South Carolina's situation against the run. They're not great. It's okay, but not great against the run. In fact, their soccer team lost tonight. They were the #1. They won the conference, but anyway, that doesn't really matter, I'm sure. Run defense for Carolina. Yeah, the SEC's got to do a better job with what they stick on their site. I mean, it's just sort of so difficult, it seems like sometimes. Let's see. Run defense. Rushing defense for South Carolina. And they are not that bad. They're giving them 137 yards a game, which is right about what Auburn, LSU, Texas A&M, sort of that ballpark. Kentucky. I mean, Georgia's going to run all over Kentucky. Mississippi State, for instance, is allowing 123, and Georgia ran for 200 on them. It's going to be tough. I mean, Notre Dame is at 116. Georgia ran for 187 on them. I'm trying to see anybody else that Georgia's played in here. Appalachian State's given up 150. So South Carolina's going to have a hard time. Where are they baiting us to pat? Why were they baiting? I don't think what the kids say really matters. Which teams out of South Carolina, Georgia Tech, and Kentucky potential upset? I mean, I would think that it would be either Georgia Tech or Kentucky. I don't know. But, I mean, you got to play in Atlanta. That's not ideal, although they've not lost in Atlanta in a long, long time against Tech. Kentucky, they are not that bad against the run. They're 133. But, Alabama's allowed 2 touchdowns on the ground this year. They're allowing 66 yards a game. And the truth is that this may be the year where Georgia has, and this may be common, okay, or this may happen. Georgia may have to beat Alabama twice to win the national championship, not just this year, but in years to come. And people just need to get used to that. They need to understand that if you're going to want to win it, you're going to have to beat Alabama, and in some cases, you're going to have to beat them twice. Or maybe just once, but probably twice. In terms of how many times would Georgia need to throw it to beat Alabama, it's got to be probably about 20 balls, and they cannot just be side-to-side balls. They're going to have to be balls that they hit down the field, balls that are threatening. He would have time. Jake Fromm would have time. He would have the ability to get the ball down the field. He would just have to connect, and we'll just see. Game plan going into Alabama. How do you take? I would run right at them. That's what I would do. I wouldn't be scared of them. They're good, but they're not unbeatable. And almost every single scenario is that Alabama is in the top couple in their in the given statistics, whether it's run game, pass game, run defense, pass defense, turnover margin, third down, points per game, points allowed. They are up there. They are on red on my board, meaning they are very good. So, what can you say? What do you make of Fromm being pulled mid-drive? I don't think anything about it. I mean, they probably shouldn't have had him out there back, at that stage. How does the offensive line match up to Bama's defensive line? Who knows? A bunch of dudes hitting each other very hard. Who thinks he has a better chance to win? I think that right now I would not mess with anything, but I think it's a little. I don't think you can be so hard and fast saying that for sure one gives you a better chance than the other when it comes time against the likes of Alabama. And it may be that they need what Eason could give them in that game. I don't know. If I were Georgia, I would not change what I'm doing. I would run right at Alabama and try to beat them to a pulp. I would not be scared of them. I would say, hey, you're very similar to us. You've got a young quarterback. You've got a very good defense. You've got a very good offensive line. You've got a run game that won't quit. Your special teams are pretty good. Their punter's probably better than Georgia's punter. But I would just do exactly, what you're doing now and not, be scared of them or anything. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily scared of them. And I don't think that you got to prove a point against them either. I do think, though, yes, you do have to throw some. So I think that it will have to be effective quarterback play. And I don't think you should be scared to make a change if you have to. But I think right now I would go in and do nothing really much different. Well, Alabama's defensive injuries exist in the SEC championship game. I don't know a lot about that. I'm sorry. The quarterback at Alabama threw a pick against Tennessee. Well, the second string kid did for sure. I'm not so sure about the first string kid. I've got so many windows open here on my internet. Just recovering from Halloween. Yeah, that was the backup quarterback when I was watching Tennessee, Alabama. Yeah, Georgia, I mean, does Sony pass Gurley? I'm not sure. Would it be a heavy dose of play action against Alabama or regular drop back? I'm telling you, they're going to try to throw it. They're going to try to throw it 15 times if they can, but they probably will have to throw it 20 times. Auburn, Georgia, kickoff time. So it's so funny because half of y'all are saying what's going to happen against Alabama, and the other half are freaking out saying don't look forward. So it's probably a happy medium, right? Talking about the Auburn 3:30. So I think it's going to be 3:30 myself. But we can't ever, know until CBS picks it. If you're watching the Alabama LSU game, which I'm sure you will, if Mississippi State wins this week and Alabama wins this week, that would give them a pretty good shot at sticking that game on CBS. But this will probably go down to, does Auburn play? Does Auburn beat A&M or not? If Auburn beats A&M, they will stick that at 3:30 for sure. I would think. You think Trent comes back next year? I'm not sure. I think he probably would leave. I would probably leave. Do you think there will be a noise difference between 3:30 and 7? I do not, because by at the 3:30 game after daylight savings is basically a night game. Now, I know Claude and them do not call that a night game, and it's not. It's 3:30. But after 5 o'clock in Alabama, That is a night game. So it will be night in the third and fourth quarter. Is Roquan Smith leaving? I would bet a lot of money that he leaves for sure. I think he should. It's a great kid. He's just a good kid. I'm happy for him. Do Penn State and Ohio State both get left out? That's the thing, man. I just don't know if they're going to leave out that massive TV number. I just don't know if they'll leave that out. I mean, Ohio State has still got Iowa, Michigan State, Illinois, who is horrible, and Michigan to go. I don't know that Penn State will be able to sneak in this year because they don't really have a marquee win that I'm aware of. Let me check. They just lost the wrong game. They survived Iowa. They don't really have a great win. They just don't. Now they've got Michigan State. Better not lose that game because then you're done. Then you're definitely then you're going to Cotton Bowl or worse. But at Michigan State, what is that line? Let me check that line. That'll be interesting because I think that all right. So Penn State's a touchdown favorite at 8 points. They just need to keep winning, and they can make their case, but I'm not sure. Some of these went off the screen too fast. I'm sorry. Ohio State, I think, could still get in there. Let's see Clemson's into the season. Clemson still has to deal with NC State. That's their game. I mean, if they don't lose this week, I'm not sure when they lose. Florida State's bad. Citadel, obviously, is not very good. And then South Carolina and Columbia, they could lose that game. I kind of doubt it. I think if Clemson wins, they're in there. So we'll see. Here's a poor Florida guy. He's probably got the crocodile tears going this week. Maybe it's getting better for the Gators. We'll see. I doubt it. Not going to be a lot better. Not this year, at least. I don't know what this is that I'm watching. Oh my God. I missed your other questions. I'm going to go for a couple of more minutes here. Matt's doing a job. I think Matt has done an exception. I love Chad Simmons. I mean, honestly, he's a very good friend of mine. He did a very good job for a long, long time. But Matt has done a very good job. In fact, Matt should be doing this more often, but we'll keep it going. Do I believe in the Gruden rumors? Definitely not. If you're talking about him going to Tennessee, I don't see that happening. And honestly, I don't think it necessarily. I just don't know what matters as long as you're playing as well as Georgia is right now. When do you think Tennessee fires Butch? I think they won't do it until the end of the season. I don't see the point in doing it right now. Tennessee's got a kind of an easy game this week, and then they play. They still got Vanderbilt, I know, and they got to deal with LSU. I forgot about that, so that'll be great fun. They could lose a couple more games, for sure. I mean, them getting to a bowl game is gonna require at least a decent win. And they will not. I don't think that they will beat LSU. Is Yontae Mayton going to have any help this year? I don't know. If Malzahn goes to Arkansas, I don't know what you do if you're Arkansas. I mean, I really don't. You had a very good coach in Bobby Petrino, who was just either, I don't want to be too strong here, but kind of a sexual. I don't know if predator is the right way right now, but certainly shouldn't be doing that with young girls. I don't know what you do there. Someone's just asking about, does Kirby hate Mark Weiser? I don't see how you could hate Mark Weiser. He's very lovable. You could get annoyed by Mark. Those are two different things. Kirby is just, this is who he is. He's kind of always been this way, and he's doing what he does. It's not going to change. He's a lot happier than Nick Saban. He gets compared to Nick Saban all the time. He's drastically more happy than Nick Saban ever thought about being. during these press availabilities. And, you know, I mean, I obviously have people that talk to me on the inside, and their whole point is that the only thing Kirby worries about is winning games. He's not worried about anything else. You know, what does he have to do to win games? That's it. And, you know, answering Mark's question or whoever, you know, I don't know. I don't listen to commentators for the most part. I try to keep the TVs muted. I have multiple. I have 3 screens so I can watch multiple games at the same time on Saturdays and Thursdays. So I don't. So it would be too much noise. So I keep it muted for the most part. I do like Gary Danielson. I like. I don't get to hear Kirk Herbstreit a lot. Scott Howard, that's on a delay. Talking about the president, I'm not going to even come close to venturing into those waters. Do you do this question? I do this typically on every Sunday night around 9 o'clock, sometimes a little earlier. I went at 8:30 this past Sunday night. And then I think I'm going to do these every Tuesday. I'm going to probably do them with the show from here on out. Black jerseys for South Carolina. I have not heard that, but if they're going to wear them, they're running out of time. And they only got 2 games left. And, you know, South Carolina, 3 o'clock. I mean, what's the weather? It's not going to be that hot. So that's not going to be a problem. I do want to see the LBJ movie. I will say that. That's a fascinating time in history. Yeah, 77 degrees. You could wear black, no problem. Any big recruits at the game this week? You need to go to dawgpost.com, dawgpost.com for that stuff. And the only reason I say that is because I don't want to say yes or no and not give you the complete rundown. We will have that up Thursday night, Friday. Matt's running all that stuff, getting it together. Matt really has done a very good job, no question. Dylan has done a very good job of getting the job done on Dogpost, and I feel like I even have to throw Wes a bone in there. Masters tickets for you this year? No, and they're called badges, and you would be a patron and all that hoity-toity stuff. How many dogs get drafted? Quite a few. Does Georgia have a top 3 class this year? I don't know about that. I'm not sure about top 3. Probably top 5 or 7. Top 7. Next year, they very well could be the number 1 class in 2019 for sure. They've done a very, very, very good job already of getting the job done on that front. Do the Dogs lock up the East this weekend? I mean, they can eliminate South Carolina. Kentucky would have to lose to Ole Miss. So, I mean, they're only a 3-point favorite in that game, which is strange. Yeah, they could. I don't think so. Chances with Sailor pretty high. Kentucky would have to lose to South Carolina, and Georgia would have to win. So it actually could happen within 15 minutes. I mean, if Ole Miss beats Kentucky and Georgia beats South Carolina, that's it in the East. Unless my math is going wrong. Ole Miss is bad, but only a 3.5 point dog on the road. That's not that bad. Round table is coming up tomorrow. Fletcher's got a bunch of stuff going on right now with Halloween and with like all the weird stuff that he does to get ready for that, like boiling eyeballs and like he's like a big Halloween freak. If you ever saw his hair, you'd know what I'm talking about. It's got like the Muppet hair, like that kind of, and it's red. Oh, it's not red, it's orange. World Series, that's what I'm going to go do right now. So, any kid intermission, I don't know what that means. How many coaches changes in the SEC? Quite a few. Do you see the East getting better? It's got to get a little better. I don't know. No, I don't know if that matters. I mean, Georgia may eat a loss along the way in the East here and there in the future, but, from the round table, win your daughter. We got to work on spelling. I know y'all are using your thumbs, but it's tough out there. It's really a burden. All right, catch me Sunday night after Georgia Carolina, and then probably next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Thanks for joining me. Who's your money on for the next Florida coach? That is a good question. I'm not sure I know I'm not intelligent enough to know the answer for that. Probably Dan Mullen. I would hire Dan Mullen and like kind of be okay with it.